I come from mountain. I train all my life. My father teaches us wrestling, combat sambo. I wanna become best lightweight ever. This is my goal. This is my plan. And why not? Why not? I can do this.
He is relentless. He is ruthless. He smashes people. What a display of dominance. He is a monster.
The first Dagestani to have a UFC championship belt.
If you wanna find me, just send me location.
Khabib Nurmagomedov! The Eagle rises again! 29-0.
The moment this fight was announced, the world stopped. Not because it was just another title defense, not because it was just another rivalry, but because everyone knew this wasn't going to be normal. On one side stood Khabib Nurmagomedov, undefeated, silent, disciplined, a man raised in the mountains, forged by tradition, and built to dominate without mercy. On the other side stood Conor McGregor, loud, fearless, chaotic. A global superstar who didn't just fight opponents, but broke them long before the cage door closed. Honor versus ego, control versus chaos, silence versus noise. This wasn't just a clash of fighting styles. It was a collision of worlds. Millions watched. History waited. And when the cage door shut, only one man would leave unchanged. This is the story of the fight that became a war. Two paths, one destination, before the lights, before the belts, before the noise. There were two very different beginnings. One path began high in the mountains of Dagestan, Russia, a place where comfort is rare and discipline is survival. This was the world of Khabib Nurmagomedov, raised in a small village surrounded by stone, silence, and tradition. Khabib's life was shaped long before he ever stepped into a cage. His days revolved around training, family, and faith. There was no room for ego, no space for shortcuts. Wrestling wasn't a sport, it was a way of life. Victory was expected, and humility was mandatory. While other children played, Khabib trained. While others dreamed, he endured. Across the world, in Dublin, Ireland, a very different story was unfolding. Conor McGregor grew up chasing belief in a city where opportunity wasn't guaranteed. He wasn't molded by tradition, he was driven by ambition. Conor believed in himself long before the world did. He spoke success into existence, turning confidence into armor and words into weapons. Where others stayed quiet, he shouted. Where others waited, he demanded. One man was taught to lower his voice. The other learned that being heard was power. Khabib's rise was built on sacrifice. No spotlight, no shortcuts, just endless rounds, endless pressure, and a father who demanded perfection. Every lesson was earned through pain, and every win was treated as unfinished business. To him, fighting was about responsibility. To his family, to his name, to his people. Conor's rise was fueled by vision. He saw himself at the top before anyone else did. He embraced the spotlight, mastered the microphone, and bent the sport to his will. Fighting, to him, was expression, a chance to prove belief could become reality. Discipline versus desire, silence versus sound, control versus chaos. Different roads, different philosophies, but destiny has a way of narrowing every path to the same point. And eventually, both roads led to one place, the center of the octagon, the making of an unbeaten force. Greatness doesn't appear overnight, it's built, slowly, painfully, and far away from the spotlight. For Khabib Nurmagomedov, dominance was never about excitement. It was about control. Long before the UFC, before the cameras and the crowds, Khabib was already being shaped into something different. His foundation was wrestling, relentless, unforgiving, and absolute. Trained from early childhood under the watchful eye of his father, every session had a purpose. There were no wasted movements, no room for ego, only repetition, pressure, and discipline. While other fighters chased knockouts, Khabib mastered inevitability. He didn't overwhelm opponents with speed or flash. He broke them with pace. Once he grabbed hold, there was no escape. Every takedown felt heavier than the last. Every round drained more hope than the one before it. Fighters didn't just lose to Khabib. They were worn down, mentally and physically, until resistance felt pointless. His early professional career reflected that philosophy. Fight after fight ended the same way. Pressure, control, submission. No celebrations, no theatrics. Just quiet victories stacking higher and higher. Wins weren't moments. They were routines. Inside the cage, Khabib fought with a calm that unsettled opponents. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. Even in chaos, he looked comfortable. His style was suffocating, forcing mistakes, closing space, removing options. Against him, there was no plan B. What made Khabib truly dangerous wasn't just his grappling, it was his mindset. He didn't believe in losing, not as an idea, not as a possibility. Every fight was approached the same way: dominate, control, finish. Emotion stayed outside the cage. Inside, there was only the task. As the wins piled up, so did the fear. Undefeated records grow heavy. Expectations tighten. Pressure breaks most fighters, but pressure only sharpened him. With each victory, the legend grew. Not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. Opponents entered knowing what was coming, and still couldn't stop it. Khabib wasn't chasing greatness. He was enforcing it, and by the time the world truly started watching, the unbeaten force was already complete. The king of chaos, where some fighters seek control, others thrive in disorder. And no one embraced chaos like Conor McGregor. From the moment he entered the spotlight, Conor understood something most fighters didn't. Fights are won long before the cage door closes. While others stayed silent, he spoke. While others trained in the shadows, he demanded attention. Every word, every prediction, every confrontation was deliberate. Chaos wasn't a byproduct of his presence, it was the weapon. Conor's rise through the sport was fast, violent, and unforgettable. Knockouts came early, titles followed, and with every victory, his confidence grew louder. He didn't just beat opponents, he dismantled their belief. By fight night, many were already defeated, carrying doubt into the cage. Inside the octagon, Conor fought with precision, wrapped in unpredictability. His timing was sharp, his movement was loose. His left hand was a threat opponents could see coming, and still couldn't stop. He trusted his instincts completely, willing to take risks others wouldn't dare. But what truly separated him was his mind. Conor weaponized pressure. He flipped expectations, turned crowds into allies, and made chaos feel comfortable. The noise, the lights, the tension, it fueled him. Where others tightened up, he relaxed. Where others crumbled, he flourished. He wasn't bound by tradition. He wasn't loyal to systems. He believed in himself relentlessly. Every fight became a spectacle. Every build-up felt personal. He blurred the line between sport and theater, making the world watch whether they loved him or hated him. Conor didn't promise victory. He declared it. And as his fame exploded, so did the stakes. Titles, money, legacy, everything moved faster around him. The chaos grew louder. The expectations grew heavier. But for the king of chaos, that was the point. Because when everything around him was unstable, that's when Conor McGregor was at his most dangerous. When respect turned personal at first, it was just business. Two champions, two egos, two men chasing the same prize. But somewhere along the way, the line was crossed. What began as competitive tension slowly transformed into something darker. Words stopped being promotional. Jokes stopped being harmless. The rivalry between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor was no longer about rankings or belts. It became about identity. Conor had always used words as weapons, but this time the attacks cut deeper. He didn't just target the fighter. He went after culture, family, faith, and for Khabib, those weren't topics for entertainment. They were sacred. Respect, once lost, couldn't be recovered. The tension spilled beyond interviews and press conferences. Cameras captured moments that felt less like hype and more like warning signs. Anger replaced anticipation. Control met provocation. Then came the moment that changed everything. A confrontation outside the cage. Sudden, chaotic, and dangerous. Windows shattered. Lines were crossed that couldn't be undone. What should have been a fight promotion turned into a real-world incident with real consequences. For Khabib, it confirmed what he already felt. This was no longer sport. From that point on, the fight took on a different weight. This wasn't about proving who was better, it was about settling something that words had broken. Every stare became colder, every silence became heavier, every countdown ticked louder. For Khabib, victory now meant restoring honor. For Conor, it meant domination, inside and outside the cage. There was no respect left to protect, no peace left to preserve. Only one outcome remained inevitable. They weren't just going to fight, they were going to settle it. The biggest fight ever. Some fights are big, some fights define careers. This one defined an era. The moment it was announced, the sport changed. Social media exploded. News outlets crossed into mainstream headlines. Fans who had never watched a single fight before suddenly knew the names Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor. This wasn't just a title fight. It was a global event. Months of tension had led to this moment. Every interview added fuel. Every stare down raised the temperature. The hostility was no longer manufactured. It was real, and the world could feel it. Fight week arrived. and with it, pressure unlike anything the UFC had ever seen. The arena buzzed with anticipation. Fans traveled across continents. The crowd was divided, loud, emotional, and ready to explode. At the weigh-ins, boos drowned out cheers. Eyes locked. Words were exchanged. Security stood closer than ever. There was no room left for hype, only consequences. On paper, it was simple: champion versus challenger. But everyone knew better. This was discipline against defiance, control against chaos. Two undefeated paths colliding under the brightest lights the sport had ever seen. Millions watched live. Millions more waited in silence. Records would be broken. Legacies would be rewritten. And no matter the outcome, nothing would be the same afterward. As the lights dimmed and the cage door closed, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just the biggest fight in UFC history. It was the moment the entire world was watching. The fight, control versus chaos. When the cage door closed, the noise faded, but the tension didn't. From the opening seconds, the contrast was clear. Khabib Nurmagomedov moved forward with purpose, calm and calculated. Conor McGregor circled loose and sharp, eyes locked, waiting for the moment to strike. Chaos struck first. Conor fired with confidence, landing clean shots that reminded everyone why he was dangerous. For brief moments, the crowd erupted. The belief surged. This was the storm he thrived in. But Khabib didn't panic. He absorbed the energy, closed the distance, and turned chaos into confinement. One takedown changed everything. The canvas became a trap. Khabib's weight felt heavier than it looked, his grip tighter than expected. Every attempt to escape only drained more energy. Round after round, the pattern repeated. Conor looked for space. Khabib removed it. Against the fence, on the ground, pressed under relentless pressure, the fight slowed to Khabib's pace. Short strikes, heavy control, no wasted motion. The kind of dominance that doesn't look dramatic but feels suffocating. Then came the moment no one expected. Khabib stood with Conor and traded. Clean shots landed. The undefeated grappler wasn't just controlling the fight, he was winning everywhere. The chaos had nowhere left to hide. By the later rounds, exhaustion set in. Conor's movements slowed, his reactions dulled. The confidence that once filled the arena began to fade. Every breath became heavier, every scramble became harder. Control was winning, and when the opening appeared, Khabib didn't hesitate. He locked it in. The pressure closed. The resistance vanished. The tap came. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. Control had defeated chaos. The fight was over. But what followed would be just as unforgettable. Submission, then explosion. The moment came quietly. No wild scramble. No desperate flailing, just pressure, relentless and exact. As Khabib Nurmagomedov tightened his grip, the outcome became unavoidable. The chaos that once fueled Conor McGregor had nowhere left to run. Trapped, exhausted, and out of options, the resistance finally broke. The tap ended the fight, but it didn't end the war. Years of insults, crossed lines, and bottled emotion erupted in seconds. The restraint that defined Khabib inside the cage vanished the moment the referee intervened. What followed was raw, uncontrolled, and shocking. The octagon exploded. Khabib leapt the fence. Chaos spilled into the arena. Corners clashed. Security rushed in. A moment meant for celebration turned into something far more volatile. The crowd roared, not in joy, not in anger, but in disbelief. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't promotion. This was real. The victory felt secondary. The belt lay forgotten. What remained was the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The disrespect, the pressure, the personal attacks that could no longer be contained. In a single night, the greatest fight in UFC history became one of its most controversial. The submission sealed the result. The explosion sealed the memory. And long after the lights dimmed, one truth lingered. The fight had ended, but the consequences were just beginning. Legacy of the Eagle. When the chaos faded and the noise died down, what remained was something far quieter and far more powerful. The legacy. For Khabib Nurmagomedov, greatness was never about applause. It was about fulfillment, about honoring his family, his faith, and the man who shaped him into a champion, his father. Undefeated, unbroken, uncompromised. In a sport defined by damage and decline, Khabib walked away complete. No comebacks, no desperate returns, no chasing validation. He left at the peak, with nothing left to prove and no doubts unanswered. What made his legacy unique wasn't just the record, it was the manner. He dominated without ego. He won without theatrics. He carried himself with restraint in a world built on excess. Opponents didn't just lose to him, they were changed by him. His style rewrote expectations, Pressure became power. Control became artistry. He showed that discipline could silence chaos and that consistency could outlast hype. But beyond the cage, his legacy ran deeper. Khabib represented something rare in modern sports: loyalty to his roots, to his team, to his values. Even in victory, he spoke of responsibility. Even in fame, he remained grounded. When he lost his father, the anchor of his life and career, the path forward lost its meaning. So he chose peace. Walking away wasn't weakness, it was strength. It was the final lesson of the eagle, knowing when the fight is over. Titles fade, records break, highlights get replayed. But some legacies don't need noise. They soar quietly and are never forgotten. When the dust finally settled, the fight stood still, frozen in time. Not because of the punches, not because of the submission, but because of what it represented. This wasn't just a clash between two fighters. It was a confrontation between philosophies. Khabib Nurmagomedov showed the power of discipline, patience, and purpose. Conor McGregor embodied belief, audacity, and chaos. Both paths reached the same stage, but only one could define the outcome. The fight forced the sport to look in the mirror. It asked whether greatness is built in silence or shouted into existence, whether dominance should entertain or simply overwhelm, whether legacy is measured by noise or by permanence. For some, this fight was about control defeating chaos. For others, it was about consequences catching up to confidence. For the sport itself, it was a reminder that moments matter, and some moments never fade. Years from now, records will change. New champions will rise. Louder stars will emerge. But this fight will remain untouched, a turning point in MMA history. Because it wasn't just remembered for how it ended, it was remembered for how it felt. Two paths, one destination, and a legacy that will forever define an era. Some fights crown champions. Others tell the truth. This one did both.